Hey guys, welcome back to our double header for today of Executive Espresso, Caffeinated Conversations with, me, Doc Heath. And we have a great guest on board who is actually sitting in a pharmacy right now. And what probably the most interesting backdrop I've seen, but Jerry is a conflict resolution coach for Asian American leaders. He started coaching back in 2017 to help other Asian American professionals deal with the challenges that they encounter at work, with their families, and within themselves. Don't we all have a lot of self conflict? And prior to starting this coaching business, he worked as a pharmacist and he began facilitating leadership workshops, over a decade ago. So he has lots of experience in this. And as a hostage negotiation trainer myself, I'm always interested in new techniques. And Jerry offers a wide range of such techniques through his coaching services, which include individual coaching, group workshops, and keynote presentations. And let's get him on the screen here. Jerry, thank you for being here with us today. Yeah, hey, look at that. There's all the drugs a guy could ever need.
Yeah, yep. They keep making more of them.
Yeah, there's a pill for everything. One of the most interesting medications I recall hearing about, probably, I don't know, almost 2 decades ago, I think it's been, is for hyperhidrosis, people that sweat too much. I thought, what are they going to think of next, And when it comes to conflict resolution, talk about sweating. How did you pivot from being a pharmacist to being a guy that focuses on conflict resolution?
Yeah, that transition makes sense to me because I lived it, but for a lot of other people, they may not understand how I got from point A to point B. So basically, the highlights of that journey are that in working for a chain pharmacy, you learn some techniques in conflict that aren't necessarily the healthiest because it's less about helping define the problem and collaborating on a solution as opposed to just placating the customer because you don't want to lose out on the potential revenue by having them spend less money at your store. And so after enough people pleasing, you could say, I said I needed something different. And so I leveraged my connections to get a teaching job at a pharmacy consulting company that I moved to Houston for. I got fired from that 11 months later. And that was the first wake up call because part of the reason my boss got upset with me was that I would lock up every time she was upset. And so if you can't resolve conflict, don't stick around, right? You shouldn't expect to. The next wake up call that said that I needed to get better at difficult conversations was when I was in a job where 4 of my paychecks bounced filling for crooked doctors. So when your boss is clearly ripping you off, how do you confront this person? And the life's manual usually doesn't have that page up front, right? Then, after I got out of that job, managed to get on with another job that, with the help of my friends that liked me but couldn't pay more than 8 hours a week. So that summer, while I was basically on a contract gig, I managed to have an opportunity to facilitate my first leadership workshop through some friends of mine who run a pharmacy leadership nonprofit. And so teaching leadership helped kind of open some possibilities in my own mind and change my mindset because before I was in this failure avoidance mentality where I said, I hate looking incompetent, I hate struggling, and I'm not optimistic about actually getting good at this. So let me just avoid situations where I look incompetent or I just make things worse. And now I gave myself permission for what's possible that maybe I could actually be good at this leadership thing. And so I had the confidence to take on a leadership position and promptly realized just how much work I actually needed to do in order to be effective. Because I actually got written up at my next job for not dismissing or writing up technicians behaving badly. And so difficult conversations basically was the prerequisite and the doorway that I struggled to go through in order to actually be an effective leader. And so when I decided I wanted to focus on people development after enough jobs folded, I said, you know what, this is going to have to be my area of expertise because I'm the one who struggled with it so much. And so I've been thankful and fortunate to help other clients help navigate and respond to their challenges a little more effectively as a result of my own experience and my struggle with difficult conversations.
That's awesome. I love that you just leveraged your mistakes to become an expert in this area. What are some of the common mistakes people make with conflict, and maybe some of the common mistakes that you made early on with conflict?
Yes, yes. The first one, and this is actually a newer one that I've reflected on lately. People, the first mistake is telling yourself the wrong story around conflict, or an unproductive story around conflict, because initially conflict was someone is upset with me and I don't like people who are upset with me, and I don't want to ruin my popularity because that's my biggest priority. So let me take the path of least resistance or do something to placate just to make it go away. But then I feel resentful and hurt and frustrated that I couldn't be more honest. So the first is to say, instead of a story of, oh, conflict means I messed up, versus conflict is an opportunity to really be honest with someone.
And I love that because as a really, really, really amateur writer, I love the science of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And the human brain is wired for stories. So that's
Mm-hmm.
such a powerful thing to master the story you tell yourself
Mm-hmm.
about the interaction in front of you. That's great stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'd say the second one is listening to respond instead of listening to listen. And that's when you in saying that this is the story around, oh, I messed up, I still have to defend myself, right? You, as soon as you find something that you need to respond to, you immediately cut off the person, and they get even more upset because they don't feel respected when you interrupt them. So that's another common mistake. And then the third ties back into the story, where it's just to say, hey, if I'm initiating this conflict and I have a story, because our brains are wired to fill in any missing information, right? And something can feel justified, but as long as it's not verified, good luck, right? And so when you go in with a justified but unverified story and you charge ahead, usually you end up embarrassing yourself and causing a lot of needless grief that could have been avoided or prevented had you simply taken the time to slow down
Oh
and
yeah.
scope things out. Yeah.
Well, you know, on your second point, I think that is so important also because if we rolled up on a crisis situation where somebody literally had a gun to their head or someone else's head, uh, even though I was with all the guys in blue and they had all the weapons and the lights and the armaments and everything, the worst thing we could do is roll up on a scene and start telling them. We would roll up on a scene and let them tell us,
Mm-hmm.
and it was okay, whatever they had to say. My buddy Dominic, who's now passed away, but they came up with a motto, and they actually had it on the patch on their shoulder. Three simple words: "Talk to me."
Good.
Just talk to me.
Yeah.
And but people have a hard time doing that. Why do you think? Let's go back to your personal experience. Why do you think you had a hard time yourself listening to the complaints? And in my business, we call it catastrophizing.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to the catastrophizing, often the heated catastrophizing of someone in front of you.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's this desire for this innate identity to be liked. Like, I'm a good person and I'm a likable person. And this person, when they're upset with me, I don't think they really appreciate everything that I bring to the table, right? And I don't. And then when you feel like you have to explain yourself, right, and you say, no, like, I need to interrupt this very unfair, very what I deem inaccurate story. And the irony is that I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the irony is that the best defense is to just listen in full, right, without interrupting, right? So, and
Yeah,
we can
because
elaborate that in a second. Yeah.
well, because the way I view it, I'm going to guess that you have back there somewhere some anti-emetics, some things to keep
There you
people from throwing up, and and I think that not to be gross, but I think that that's just the opposite of what we need to do in conversation, especially in a tense situation, is go ahead and let the throwing up happen
go. Mm-hmm.
to actually induce the verbal vomit because people have a bit of a pressure cooker thing going on that they just really want to get it out.
Hmm.
And so if I can facilitate that and they expend their energy on that, but what's some self-talk you tell yourself these days? What do you say to yourself if somebody's really coming at you? What are some mental tips you do there?
Yeah, I'll give a recent example. So at my day job, as a pharmacy manager, that basically serves as my leadership lab, right? So I actually have some credibility when I give advice. So there was a point when our courier service couldn't find the address of one of our patients to deliver a prescription, which was maddening because what are we paying you to do, right? Oh, it's a new neighborhood. The zip code didn't show up, and they called me at one point. They called me earlier in the day, and right as I'm looking it up online, they say, "Oh, it turns out it shows up. Okay, we'll take care of it." Well, the patient called back later that actually the patient's husband called back, very irate because they're like, "Yeah, they said they'd be here." I told them no. They confirmed that they could find your address. They say, "Well, they never showed up, and all our calls went to voicemail." Or whatever, or they said, when the courier tried calling them and says it went to voicemail, and they said, no, they're lying. We've been here the whole time, and our phones have been on the whole time. We don't know what's going on. You need to do something about this. And I said, do you think I like dealing with this any more than you do? And he just started laughing. And in that tip, right, is when you realize that his frustration would be true for anyone in this situation. And it's something then, therefore, I don't have to take personally. So, number one, the frustration is justified regardless of who has to clean it up. Number two, we agree on the problem is that the delivery guy did not come through for us. And at the same time, as unfair as it is that I have to clean up the mess, it's still an opportunity, regardless of whose fault it is, to make sure, hey, you know what? I want to have compassion for this guy. This guy is reaching out because his wife needs medication, needs to get better. Okay, let me. And plus, this guy technically is a good sport about it, right? Like when I was able to, like build some rapport with him, it was fine. There are some that are terrible, right? You just say, okay, let me just diffuse this bomb and then never see this person again, and sometimes sometimes that happens. But I'd say, yeah, those are some of the tips I tell myself.
That's
Is to say, hey, you
awesome.
know what? Find a solution. Like we
Yeah.
both want to find a solution. Let's find this together. Sooner the better.
You know,
Yeah.
and I wish I could remember the name of this culture. If I try to guess, I may get it wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
there are actually cultures
Mm-hmm.
that, unlike our, I hate to say Americanized because it's not just America, but most
Mm-hmm.
first world cultures, instead of focusing on who caused the problem, they just focus on the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of blaming who spilled the milk, they just clean up the milk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we could do that in business. We can do that in families and
Mm-hmm.
partnerships. Focus on solutions
Yeah.
instead of blame. What are some we talked about three powerful questions
Mm-hmm.
that you recommend as a leader. What are those three powerful questions that might help leaders in difficult circumstances?
Yeah, this is where the coach approach to leadership is a nice lens to try to lead people with, because there's a time and place for someone. Maybe you need a dictator who gives you difficult instructions in the crisis. That's great, but if you expect people to really process and build a good rapport, then yeah, here are three questions that can really help you. The first is, well, what did we learn here, guys? And so instead of saying, well, who's at fault, we say, well, what is a lesson that we can all benefit from, right? So, like from this situation, okay, what did we learn? Well, okay, this courier is not that great. So it's like, okay, what did we learn? We need to do some processes, right? And so we'll ask ourselves, so what did we learn? Here's the lessons. Now the second question: what is the real challenge here for you? Like if you're trying to coach someone specific, or if you're trying to talk through a group, you say, what is the real challenge here for us? It's like, well, we're tired of the stress that comes from other people, outside sources, kind of ruining the good work that we're doing. So that's the real challenge, is that we're exhausted from having to clean up messes that we shouldn't have to clean up, right? And then we ask ourselves the third question, which is, well, what is our next action? Well, the simple answer is find another courier, right? Hey, like what are some of the processes to, or we offer more specific instructions if they call back saying, hey, we can't find this place. And we say, okay, well, I'm going to stay on the phone with you and help you navigate the route until you get to the location you're supposed to get to, right? And so those are the three questions that help other people generate solutions. And so therefore, it's not all on the leader to provide all the answers. is a way to invite collaboration and get everyone's collective talents and strengths on board.
Excellent, because as a leader, yeah, you don't have to have all the answers. You can facilitate the process, and I think it's really kind of what's the tale. You can teach, you can give a person a fish and feed them for a day, or teach them how to fish and feed them for a lifetime. So really, these problems, this conflict, is an opportunity to learn how to better relate to people, better deal with conflict, and before we run out of time, let's get on to our triple shot of the day and kind of pick Jerry's brain about his own current top mental struggle. What's your top mental struggle currently that you're focused on tackling?
My current mental struggle is undoing the story I tell myself about making mistakes. Because it's one thing to apply it at work well, right? And then you realize, oh, there's a lack of consistency in this growth mindset in my personal life or in getting better at sales, right? To build my business. And you realize just how much more work you have to do, which is not meant to be exhausting, even though it can be. But I'd say that's my biggest struggle is saying,
That's
hey, you know
awesome.
what? I've got a lot of, cultured beliefs that were well-meaning, but ultimately are obsolete now. And I need to do the work of making sure that I don't let old beliefs crowd out the more productive and helpful newer ones.
And it really is about rewriting your story, guys and gals. If you don't like where the conclusion your life is headed for, if you don't like the plot line, then rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
Rewrite the story. What's your current best mindset hack? What are you doing currently? Maybe one thing that seems to be head and shoulders above the rest works for you.
Oh man. Yeah, what I take this from the Designing Your Life certification I received recently, and that is to simply set the bar low and clear it, right? When you see this massive mountain of a challenge, right, where I'm like, I'll use a very technical example. I have to redo all our standard operating procedures because we're, building out a lab for some new business. And I look at all the different SOPs that I have to, customize and edit. And I just say, oh, okay. All right, set the bar low and clear. Can I do one sentence? Yes. Okay. Can I do the next sentence? Yes. And so you realize, okay, let me chunk this down. And next thing you know, you generate the very momentum that you wished you had, but turns out you had the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. It's I call it's called task segmentation.
Good.
And if you're not that you should eat elephants, but eating an elephant, do it a bite at a time,
Mm-hmm.
and like anything else. I find that I've known business owners who would have a huge task to do,
Mm-hmm.
and then they get into this avoidance based behavior of maybe just organizing the pens in their desk drawer or something
Yep.
instead of taking a step ahead. And
Mm-hmm.
so break those tasks down. We sabotage ourselves thinking we have to do everything all at the same time, but just break it down. Now, we talked about, I wanted to ask you life hacks for your younger self. If you could talk to your younger self, what
Mm-hmm.
would you tell your younger self?
Yeah, three things that come to mind. Number one, go global, right? Like I I was very much a kid content to play video games in an air conditioned room for many, many years, right? But when I had the chance to go to Ireland on a pharmacy school rotation for the first time, that's when I truly got to appreciate travel for myself. And I said, "Wow, my eyes are open, and wow, I need to see more of this." So that's the first thing I would tell myself is, "Hey, don't shrink in your comfort zone." The second I would say is, um, yeah, we'll start audiobooks sooner. Just because when you're able to passively learn, so in place of music on the radio, when you're actually able to take in some useful content and just passive learning, whether you're in the car or just taking a run
And
or
of
a
course,
walk.
guys, there's Audible, but
Yeah.
your local library also has Libby, the Libby app, which is
Yep.
absolutely
I
free
love it.
with the cost of a library card, which is
Yep.
also free.
Yep. And then the third is find safe places to fail. An example I give is when I've had to learn to cook for myself. And before I would just collect recipes and never use them. And it's like, Jerry, why are you collecting recipes if you're never going to actually make the meal to enjoy the meal? And So when you realize you cook at home for yourself and you realize, oh, the social stigma isn't there, I just don't like feeling like I cooked something bad and no one can know about this, right? But when you cook at home for yourself, you realize, okay, well, do I like this? Yes. Okay. How would I, mix it up a little bit so I'm not getting sick of eating the same thing over and over again? If I didn't like it, okay, definitely don't want to make that again, but what will I make instead? Or how would I change this so that I could actually eat it? So you're always moving forward in an area that you're not letting the shame and embarrassment of public.
That's awesome because
Yeah.
success is always messy, and success always first begins in failure.
Mhm.
So get out there and get messy and make it success. How can people reach out to you and find you, Jerry?
Yeah. I give away a free guide on my website called the 5 steps to easier or more effective conflict resolution. So conflict resolution for conflict diverse people, because I'm still conflict diverse no matter how much I dislike it. No matter how much better I get at it, I still dislike it. And so I have a 5-step process I give away on my website, which is adaptingleaders.com/guide. And download it for free. Just give us your email address. We'll send it right to you. And yeah, all the best stuff happens on the website. Get a complimentary 30-minute coaching call. Check out the free blog. But the guide, that's what usually gets people's attention. So check
That's
it out.
awesome. So, guys, don't avoid conflict. Just work to get better at it, and Jerry can help you do that. Reach out to him. Thank you for joining us on Executive Espresso. We will be back next Friday. Next Friday morning, and so stay tuned. I think actually we have another interview coming up tomorrow. That's going to be popping up, and we look forward to seeing you then. And have a great weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.